And you took care of whatever you needed to order
Yes,
the food?
I showed, I was over at the caterer yesterday. I just have to go ahead and get, the assistant's gonna give me the tablecloths, et cetera, so.
Sounds good. Okay, where do you stand? Right here?
Yes.
All right, so that should be.
You wanna come
perfect.
and join us?
No.
I think I'm gonna angle it slightly. Wait, just show me again because I like the other computer better.
Oh, sorry. The women are using it upstairs for a Scottish davening. Oh, you want to end it?
No, wait, so where do I? Oh, it's on already?
It's
People.
on already. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I
you're ready?
turned it on.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you.
You sit down your class?
So, absolutely, be my pleasure.
I understand, but this is studying the acronym, meaning the people who come late to shul, the acronym.
Right.
Good. I have many friends in that category.
Wait, are you the one who's the Rav in the Torah synagogue?
yes.
Okay, actually, my son Shalom, I have to work it out with him. He's going to give a lecture, which is better. He can do it next week or the 24th. So I don't know, what do you think I should have him?
What is good for his schedule?
He told me either one, so I don't know, what do you think is best here? Because we want to publicize it so more
That's
people.
why I would suggest if he's available for next week, do it next week.
Right, because some people are leaving then. That's what I thought. Okay. So what he's going to do is actually talk about the Western Sephardim, which are the Jews of mostly of Amsterdam and Holland, and then the Americas.
Then I can have an interesting chat
Right.
afterwards.
Right,
Oh, that's good.
right. So where should I, when I come next week, then we have to go upstairs, is it said?
No, as far as I know, the large screen TV
Yeah.
is now on wheels.
Oh, so you could have it set up
So
here.
theoretically, it should be able to be set up in here.
Perfect. Okay, so,
Let
Good morning.
Andrea know so-
yes, I will on my way out.
Yeah, so she can arrange with the house committee and the custodian
Right.
to make sure to have it all ready.
Or bring the screen down here, right, and then she'll publicize it to let people know. Okay, excellent, excellent.
I guess that's what they charge.
Okay, so guys, this is what we're gonna do today.
It's a lot of money.
Right, this is what I'm doing today.
Should I pass these out already? Would you let me pass them out?
No, I'm giving you a set.
Oh, thank you.
It'd be easier that way for me to give it out to people that way. Okay, good. Okay, this is for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I hope you come for it.
Just kidding. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Malka.
How you doing? Okay.
Good. Cold.
You know, I forgot to send you the maps, but we won't be needing them that much.
Okay, okay.
Okay, all right.
Oh, thank you so much.
Here, I'll sit down so I can chat with you.
Yeah.
5 minutes. total. So next week, I think I'm going to have Shalom speak.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm around. Good.
So that's
good.
why I wanted to do the Jews of Germany this week. So then when he'll talk about the Jews from Holland and London, you know.
Right. Oh, that'll be interesting.
Right, I still have to
Very.
at some point backtrack, because I never did the unit I had prepared on the early Achronim of Italy, but you know, I'll do whatever.
Right, right.
They can
How's,
stand alone.
how's he doing as a daddy or as an Abba, whatever he
He's
calls it?
loving, happy, that little baby, he's so much fun. He's getting big. Oh my gosh,
Big.
Kanina Hara. He really is.
Oh, when
know,
do you
he-
think you might get to see him? Is he gonna come here?
You know, I
You
keep
don't
on
know.
asking him. They're not so sure they want to travel. You know, they feel
Right.
it's going to be, you know, besides the health, safety, you know, I think they're a little overwhelmed taking care of this little baby.
Usually it's like that with number one.
Of course, right. After that, I remember saying to Shalom, you just like, you fit in. I mean, I did. He always says, how come you don't have more baby pictures of me? I thought I had no time to. He said, That's what I keep my eye on. Who else is
Alright.
coming in? I gotta give out the sheets.
Okay, go
All right, I'll
ahead.
be back.
Okay.
And they're just bonding, they're bonding with children's hospitals, and they're bonding government buildings.
Yeah, I just heard a conversation here about what's going on in Ukraine. I feel it's like deja vu. with
Deja
Hitler.
vu.
First they gave him Crimea. Okay, that's Sudetenland. And now he's going in, so now he's going into like
Terrible.
Prague. You know, it's
Horrible. Yeah.
it's just, and those, I don't know, I'm talking about, it's like comparing. I feel for those Jews who are stuck there. On the other hand, there were some, remember, Israel had sent
Yes.
several planes and they
Planes,
came
yeah.
back half empty. I don't know what they were thinking.
I don't know why.
I don't know. Did they not think Russia was really going to do it? I don't know. I guess not. Because
Yeah.
why would they endanger themselves now?
We're supposed to go to Poland and Germany. And, you know, Mike always does his trip,
Yes.
but I don't know. It's supposed to be the last week of May. So we'll have to see.
Well, you'll see. Hey, if you have to cancel it, you cancel it.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Your health, your safety. Is the most
We've
important.
canceled it for 2 years because of COVID. Now it's this, so.
Right, yeah. It's
But
just,
you just don't know where this is going
No.
because he's so
and this
cold-blooded.
Putin's gone crazy, and God, what's he going to do with the nuclear weapons that he has?
I know.
So it's really, I mean, it's frightening for even us, wherever,
Wherever you are.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It can touch us no matter what. All right, let me just see. All right, I've got 1 minute.
Okay.
I'm basing it, there's a clock here in the room.
Still so cold here. Oh,
I saw you had like an advisory, so it's been icy this morning.
yes.
Does Mike have trouble driving back and forth?
I don't know. He drove home late last night. He said
Oh.
it was not a good drive.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know how his drive was this morning. Usually he's home now by 5.
Oh, so
So
before it gets dark, that's good.
yeah, he's getting old, so.
It's what it is. It gets harder and harder. you know.
Harder, right,
You know.
right.
I just
right.
remember driving and seeing, that lake effect snow. You could see how dark it was on I know, it's moving towards us.
I know.
It's like scary. I say.
Yeah. I mean,
Alright,
it's particularly cold now.
Uh, okay, so wait, I think I'm going to begin in the second.
Okay,
Wait,
okay.
Here.
Here.
Okay. Barbara's not coming?
I don't know. Doesn't look like she's.
No, because usually she's here on time, so maybe she couldn't make it today. Okay, so guys, attention. I gotta get to settle down now. Okay, I'm just having conversations with my friend from Rochester, where I had lived for so many years. So anyway, so I spoke to my son Sholo, and he's going to talk about the Western Sephardim, which starts with the Jews who will leave Portugal and will go to Amsterdam and then to London and then to the Americas. Yes, but from the distance, he's in London. So next week, it's gonna be next week, we're gonna have a screen set up here.
Oh, he's coming here?
Halavai.
Oh, on the screen.
You'll see him on the screen.
Oh, I know you're talking about.
So he did it, wasn't it last year he spoke? Then we were doing everything was then on Zoom. Right. It's gorgeous. It's called the Esnoga, right?
Beautiful.
I was there also many years ago. Actually, I felt so sad davening in that shul because it is a huge structure, the Spanish Portuguese synagogue in Amsterdam, and it's like so empty. It's, I mean, so many Dutch Jews were killed, and I only learned this through my son Shlomo. I did not know. Many of them were Spanish Portuguese Jews. It wasn't just the Ashkenazi Jews. It was Spanish Portuguese. Okay,
She
here.
says she usually comes on time.
Okay. So anyway, so I'll have Andrea, put it in the bulletin because hopefully, more people might like to come. And of course, anybody who's watching it on Zoom. Thank you. But my son's a real treat. So Mir Hashem, you'll make it for next week also. He's he's very personable and whatever. I think that you would enjoy listening to him. People say, he lives in London. He's an American. He talks with an American accent. I have a little grandson there now. Now, never. He's only 5 months old. But I am sure this little boy, when he grows up, he will have that British accent. so funny. Hold on, just have to give one more out. Okay.
Rochester.
There is a thing with the Rochester accent. When I first moved to Rochester, I could detect it. People who are native Rochesterians do have an accent. Yes, they do. Well, I don't. I'm not.
No.
Does Joel have it? I don't know. But no, not so much. But I do remember hearing, I say people who like go back to Rochester many years ago, whose parents and grandparents had emigrated there. Yes, they do have this slight accent. Okay, so we had, we talked last time. I thought it was a very fascinating lecture on the Reformation and on Martin Luther and his relationship and attitude towards the Jews. And you could see how the Nazis later, took, had read Luther's writings, and so much of what, that they publicized and their propaganda was coming actually from Luther's own writings. And just bear in mind, we're going to talk more today about the Jews of Germany. That I had mentioned this to you once before, that the country ended up being divided between more Protestants to the north, but southern Germany remained Catholic. And that's, how it is to this day. Yes. So now I want to discuss a little bit more, go a little further. So I did give you a map. I don't know if it's the world's greatest map, but I remember which book it came from. Any case, so here's a map of Germany. It's now at this point, remember, it's divided up into many little principalities. How Queen Victoria married, and he came from Germany. He came from one of those little principalities. I forget the name of it right now. But in any case, Germany, again, just to emphasize, will not be united as one country until the 19th century. That's with Bismarck. Okay. But right now we're talking about a country, and it is ruled over. Obviously, each little principality has its own prince, duke, who's in charge of that area. But then there is a Holy Roman Emperor. The Holy Roman Empire included Germany, Austria. It goes into what I still think of as Czechoslovakia, what's today the Czech Republic. So covered a fairly large area. At one point was also he was considered the emperor even of Spain. But I'm just trying to give you a picture of the times. So you'll see there, here we're saying it's Germany. You see on the map. See, Saxony's in the north. Bavaria is in the south. And then, on its southeastern border is Austria. And then the eastern, Poland's to the north. Okay, at this point, we're not going to talk about so much about Poland. And then you can see there, the Czech, which stays the Czech Republic, that is Bohemia, which is Prague, and Moravia. Okay, so that's what we're going to be covering today. And again, what happened there, what was life like there in the 16th and the 17th century, obviously as it applies to the Jewish population who lived there. Okay, so you can follow along with me. You have the map, by the way, and the map on the verso. Okay, verso, the other side. Okay, that's, obviously it only goes to 1500, but again, you can just see it's called Central Europe, right? And that would include the areas, right, again, of Germany, Austria, and Bohemia, Moravia. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that, but I think this one's just definitely easier to look at because it's larger, you can see. But for some of the place names, I don't have as many place names we have to look up, but if we do, obviously this definitely shows you many more communities. Okay, all right, so let's begin. Primarily, I'm going to be discussing Germany, right? And then a little bit about Austria, very interesting history, and then a little bit about Bohemia, Moravia. Moravia not as much, but whatever. Okay, Germany. The history of the Jewish community in Germany from the Crusades on So we're talking then about the 11th, 12th centuries, all right? Is one of almost constant pain and persecution. It's like it was relentless. I don't know, I mean, awe of those Jews who did remain living under these terrible conditions, but they persevered. I mean, why are those Ukrainian Jews still there? Why'd they go back there? I can't understand it. Any case, heavy taxation kept the Jews constantly on the verge of financial ruin. There became pawns. It became pawns between the princes, of each little principality where they lived and the emperor. The emperor, supposedly they were the emperor's Jews, like they belonged to the Jews, with the idea of serfdom, like every serf belonged to a particular lord, right? So the Jews, who were they, were sort of, this loose group there. So we became then, so to speak, the serfs of the emperor. So the mindset is still the same, even into this, even though we're really talking about the end of feudalism, but the mindset is the same. And again, they were constantly, heavily taxed. I mean, it was relentless. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling so anxious now about what's going on in Ukraine and what, for God forbid, can happen. I don't know what they felt like living there under, this constant persecution. They never knew when there would be an outbreak and they would literally lose their lives, or they were constantly being expelled from one place to another. And they constantly had to somehow scrounge around for funds to pay these onerous taxes upon them. So not pleasant at all. At times they would fall prey to widespread violence, and this occurred in every century. Roving bands of peasants, egged on by fanatic Jew haters and incited by hostile clergy, periodically decimated entire regions. Again, I'm still talking historical. We're not yet in the 16th, 17th century, but you can see this attitude, this relationship towards the Jews, it is not a pleasant one at all, going back hundreds of years. During the Black Plague, and that's 1348 to 1350, the Jews suffered doubly. The plague took its toll on them too. I mean, they also got sick from it, all right, although not as heavily as from the general population. And I think that was due to our stress on cleanliness and orderliness. And, even if you never cleaned your house, at least for Pesach, you cleaned it. So one time a year, you went through the whole house. And in addition to this, they were persecuted by crazed mobs who accused the Jews of causing the plague by poisoning the wells. I mean, they had no comprehension, didn't understand, why everybody's coming down with this bubonic plague. So it's always easy to lash out and blame somebody. Of course, we are the usual scapegoat, unfortunately. Up to 300 communities were destroyed at this time. Many Jews emigrated to the east. So the movement to the east towards Poland is beginning already here in this 14th century. I'm not saying this is a huge migration, but there is a slight migration. And when we study Poland, you'll see they were actually invited in to settle there. And I'll explain that when we get to it. So they went to the east, settling in Poland, where at that time, the situation was much more favorable for the Jews. An additional impetus to the eastward migration was provided in the 15th century, all right, we're getting closer to our time now that we're talking about, by a seemingly unending chain of expulsions. The Jews who were refusing, right, all along to convert to Christianity. So, at a certain point, that's what happened with Isabella and her Ferdinand. That, well, let's just get rid of these Jews. They're a terrible influence here. Well, they were felt in Spain that they were being a terrible influence on those new Christians, so that's why they wanted them out of their country. But here too, they're refusing, to convert, so let's just get rid of them. All right, principality after principality expelled its Jews. Most of these expulsions were short-lived, and the Jews were allowed to return after staying away from a limited period. I guess after a while they realized, hey, boy, they were really bringing in some income to our little region, so let's invite them back in. But remember, I discussed with you last time, can you imagine the upheaval in your household if, let's say, every several years, you have to start packing up and schlepping everything and moving to another area. And
Fiddler on the roof.
right, and then eventually they want you back. So again, you're doing the same thing.
Then they have to look for housing again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they were still, remember I had done a whole unit on the ghetto. There are ghettos in these towns. So they're just going back again. And usually the ghettos were in one of the worst sections of the city or the town, whatever. Okay, the weakness of the German Empire during that era contributed to this state of affairs. I'm talking about German Empire, I'm talking about the Holy Roman Empire, all right?
Was it holy? or
It was
Roman?
not holy and it was not Roman,
Was it an empire?
and it wasn't even an empire, exactly. Each principality was allowed to do with its Jews as it pleased, in spite of the fact that the Jews were considered to be the personal property of the king. Shows you the weakness of the emperor, all right, according to medieval law. Okay, because of the central government's weakness, a general expulsion was not possible. So as opposed to Spain, where the entire Jewish population had to leave, its entire borders. Here, that's why I said they could go from one section to another section, maybe then return or not go on to another area. But as I say, I can just, as I say, imagine the terrible upheaval in their personal lives. The nature of Jewish life during the first century of the ghetto, this is an interesting story, okay, is illustrated by an event which took place in Frankfurt am Main between 1612 and 1616. A period of unemployment among the lower elements of the city had been causing much unrest. The patricians, this would be like more the middle class, the burghers are also called, who ruled the town, could not or would not do anything about it. All right, so meanwhile, the lower class, right? They're angry, they feel like they're being oppressed economically, and there's a lot of ferment. This gave a chance to the, let me get my own sheets because they're single and it's easier for me to, where did I put my own sheets here? Sorry, yeah, let me get those out. I can turn my page more easily that way. Hold on. All right, we did page 1, we're on to page 2. Okay. So this gave a chance to the local demagogues who sought to attain power, a chance to stir up trouble. There are always people who rise to the fore, who are leaders and influence others, all right? They found it easy to blame all the people's woes upon the Jews, naturally, right? And to demand of the patricians that the inhabitants of the ghetto be expelled. The ringleader was a baker with the name of Fett Milk. What does that mean? Milk is milk. What's fett?
Grob.
What?
Grobe milk. Fat is grob. It means it's heavy.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Heavy milk.
Heavy milk? Okay.
Yeah, a grobe.
All right. Well, he was a baker. Maybe he was a big man. I don't know. Right. His sole gift was an ability to deliver rabble-rousing speeches. I don't know what kind of a baker he was, but whatever. But again, he was this demagogue and roused up the local population. The ghetto was stormed. For a while, the Jews defended themselves, but the mob set their homes on fire. Vetmilch's followers, fearing the emperor's punishment, after all, these are the emperor's Jews, right, prevailed upon their leader to let the Jews leave the city. So, all right, so let's not murder them all. Let's just, again, get rid of them, expel them, though with nothing but their lives. The Frankfurt Jews scattered through the neighboring towns and villages, and for 2 years were supported by the charity of other Jews. So let's see what's going to happen. The patricians of Frankfurt, certain that the mob would turn upon them, now that the Jews were no longer there to bear the blame, right, for the general poverty. Okay, here, they, accusing the Jews of causing their woes. Well, the Jews have left, and boy, but they're still suffering, economically. Okay, so what are they going to do? So. And he derived considerable sums from them annually. Okay, right. That's why the emperor doesn't want to get rid of them. The emperor sent troops to restore order in the city. Fetmilch and some of his followers were condemned to die as rebels, and the Jews were invited to return to an enlarged ghetto. Thank you. Thank you. A parade of imperial soldiers led them in to the accompaniment of music. Don't forget, everything had been burned, so everything has to be rebuilt. As they passed under the gate of the city, they saw that it was decorated with fentanyl's head. Love that. The patricians now returned to power and the masses of the Christian population to their miserable existence. Even their just complaints had been completely forgotten in the unfortunate struggle about the Jews. So things just went back to the same pattern, right? And the lower classes continuing to be oppressed. The Frankfurt Jews then established this because we're now in Adar, right? Sheni, just about, we're starting tomorrow, right? We'll be Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh today, but tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. The Frankfurt Jews then established 2 fast days and 1 special Purim to commemorate the days of their misfortune and the day when another Haman had received his deserved punishment. I like that. So, all right. Well, that's the end of fentanyl. Let's go on to some other things that happened. In 1618, that's the beginning of the 30 Years' War. 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. A struggle began in Germany, which was meant to decide into which religious camp, Catholic or Protestant, Central Europe would eventually go. Now, just think, Luther has his 95 Theses that he puts on the church in Wittenberg, and that's 1517. So we're talking about 100 years later, and they're still arguing, should we, stop, worshiping God through the Catholic Church, or should we adopt? Now, at this point, Lutheranism has spread considerably, but as I told you, there are 2 factions in Germany. Maybe very heavily Protestant in one area, but still Catholic in another area. So now that's part of the reason why the war broke out. But of course, underneath it, there are always other considerations. All right. Before the war had lasted many years, the purpose of the fighting changed from religion to questions of political domination. And that would include the Habsburg Empire, all right, which is starting to grow and consolidate itself. And also the Bourbons in France. Presidency in Germany is that whole area is right in the middle. Conflict arose over the unity of the German states, the power of the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and other matters of political and economic importance. There were invasions and sieges, betrayals and massacres. The common people and peasants suffered most of all. Isn't that always the case, right? Civilian population is always stuck in the middle. The war was accompanied by a terrible plague. So in addition, this awful plague broke out, and the population of Germany was considerably reduced. After that war ended in 1648, the influence of the townsmen increased over that of the church. So you see, we're gradually moving into what will be then, I guess you could call it the modern age, where the church will play a much more diminished role, and the secular government will be the predominant ruler or the one who sets the pattern of how society should be set up.
The predominance in Germany, right?
Yes. Oh, no, it's spread all over.
I think started there.
It's right, exactly, with Martin Luther, right. Okay. Okay. And you can also see the role now of that middle class, how they're going to be this pivotal element there that's going to make this transition from a very strong church, or in some cases, it's a very strong monarchy, to a position where the middle class will play, increasingly governing role in the various countries. Not yet. Don't forget this again. It's just starting here around this time period. When it was all over, the only decision reached was that Germany would remain disunited both religiously and politically. This prolonged and bloody struggle also ended with many unhappy results for the Jews of Central Europe. Naturally, we're caught in the bind, and we had nothing to do with this. This is a war started between Catholics and Protestants, or between different dynasties, in the area to their east, to the west of them. But we're living there, And so we are going to be caught up and attacked and blamed for whoever rises more to the fore. The 30 Years' War led to a general disruption of Jewish life. Many ghettos were sacked by marauding soldiers, and enormous fines and forced contributions were imposed on the various Jewish communities. I mean, who's paying for these armies, right? Right? Isn't that the problem in Russia now invading? They didn't think it through. They said the supplies aren't coming through to those Russian soldiers. The Jews did not participate in the fighting, but they suffered from both sides. At the same time, a small number of Jews profited considerably from this war. In those days, there had not yet developed any commissary department to provide for the needs of the various armies. People tend to forget, but that's such a crucial element to an army that's going to be successful. You have to make sure that the goods, right? Not just talk about ammunition, but you have to make sure clothing, food, all these things will flow through and replenish, the supply constantly. We're not talking about something that's lasting a short time period. This is 30 years this fighting is going to be going on. The equipment and food for men and animals, right? Because in those days you were fighting with the horses, right? Or you had mules, right, to help transport things, were supplied by private individuals on a contract basis. The rulers, from the emperor on down, frequently entrusted the job of finding supplies and sending them to wherever necessary to any Jew who had shown financial skill in other matters. Let me finish the whole thing and then we'll discuss it. Such Jews now became the official purveyors for the royal courts. The Jews were the only group to remain neutral in a war with an avowed religious motivation. They could also be trusted to conduct business with fellow Jews on the other side of the line. Right, so they didn't care, so they could make arrangements with their fellow Jewish brethren, wherever they might live, to keep that flow of goods, constantly going. Didn't matter where it was coming from, and the armies and the generals and the emperor, they didn't care. Just get it to us, right? Gather it together and have it somehow shipped to us. I don't think there were trains in those days. So it was obviously wagons that were delivering everything. This way, a small number of Jews became wealthy and influential. They could help pay the fines and contributions imposed upon their home communities. And very often their influence in high quarters protected the very lives of their fellow Jews because they were needed. So as a result, they could serve. Later on, it will become known, these wealthy people in the various towns, they're going to be called court Jews, because they would be the spokesperson on behalf of all the Jews in their town before, let's say the emperor or the particular prince of their principality. So they're not quite called court Jews yet at this point, but that will be later in time. Do you know that incident with General Grant during the Civil War? This was Abraham Lincoln, of course, is our president, and that General Grant issued it was in Tennessee, and he issued an order against that all the Jews in that area had to leave because the Jews, certain Jews, believe me, they were not all Jewish people who were doing this, but obviously, right, we're an easy target to unleash our anger. And what happened is goods were being sent in, obviously both to the Union forces, but also to the Confederate forces. So he ordered an expulsion of all the Jews, but Abraham Lincoln actually rescinded the order that he could not do it. And later on, Grant actually, I think, became, it's considered right about you, right? He treated the Jews, nicely, about it. But you could just, it's like people, so to speak, make use of us when we have certain skills, right? But they can just as easily turn against us, right?
Yeah.
What's that, Yiddish? What are you saying? I don't know Yiddish. So. No, I don't know Yiddish.
When you need a speech, you take him off from clear, from hanging.
Oh, but you'll make use of him.
Exactly.
Right. So,
They make use of it.
right. So, and I like that idea, right? The fact that it didn't matter which side the Jews were on, because the flow of goods could still, you could send your letter in Hebrew and saying, I don't know, I need 100 kilo of rice, whatever, flour, make sure it comes to me, or to some neutral area, and I'll come pick up the goods and provide it to my army. The constant persecutions and expulsions left their mark. Some Jews moved westward to Holland, right? So we're going to learn from Shalom how it's mostly these Portuguese Jews who are going to then go and settle there eventually. It will only happen. Holland had been under Spanish rule, but finally they got rid of them. It became a Protestant country, and and then so there's a big influx of Jews. Those who had been perhaps conversos, they're now returning one with openly as Jews, and that's why they're going to say. But you see how these German Jews also, remember when we learned about the Jews of Greece? I found that so interesting, that German Jews, among the earlier people from other areas moving to Greece, were German Jews. I found that fascinating. Before even, that influx of Spanish Jews, okay, there were German. We can see, because over the centuries, look how terrible their lives are, and so they're looking for some refuge wherever they can find it. Okay, where am I up to? About going eastward, okay. But obviously most will move eastward to Poland, okay. This massive eastward migration shifted the center of European Jewish population from Central Europe to Poland. And gradually the Jews living in the Slavic East assumed the position of dominance in Jewish scholarship. Now that's not going to happen until more the 18th and then of course into the 19th centuries, but there is this gradual movement. And when we talk more about the great Achronim from this time period, you'll recognize names. These were, German Jews who had moved to Poland. Okay. Central Europe gradually emerged from the calamity of the 30 Years' War, greatly diminished in population, badly disorganized economically, and broken up into tiny political states. What had been broken up even before, but that continues. The largest of these states was Austria. We'll discuss Austria later, whose king was also the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Not always, but very often the emperor was an Austrian. All right. Do you see that close link, between Austria and Germany? So do not be surprised that when there was the Anschluss, right, and 38, and Germany, invaded Austria and took it over, and the Austrians welcomed him with open arms. They had a great affinity with Germany. Right? The next in size was Prussia, right? Bismarck will come out of Prussia, later, not now. Whose ruler about the year 1700 changed his title of elector to that of king. So he's, getting a little taken with himself. I'm not just the elector, which would be like the head of this particular principality of Prussia. I am the king of Prussia. All right. Then there were literally hundreds of almost independent principalities, cities, and bishoprics. So sometimes, the bishop would be the head of a particular region or a particular town. The head of each of these or its group of leading patricians, and again, patricians means middle class burghers, all right, exercised authority with few limitations. I mean, it was like absolute control, right, of those areas. Their interests were confined to taxing, conducting war, and living in as grand a style as possible. I've never been to Germany. I have no interest in going ever to Germany, but there are some magnificent castles, right, all over, and they were built by these various princes, of these regions. Right. Did you ever hear of the Mad One, right? The one who built the fairy tale looking castle, whatever. Okay, their interests, all right. Against this background, changes were imperceptibly, slowly made, affecting the life of the Jews. Okay, now I'll discuss a little bit more. I'll talk more about Prussia. The burghers, the town rulers, were still bound to the old ways of running business. They feared the slightest change in the methods of commerce and industry. Their guilds, now guilds come from the medieval time period, right? Depending on your skill set. You belong to a guild, and they would only let in people that they wanted. And obviously the Jews were not allowed in. Okay. They regulated everything from the price of the smallest article to the rights of succession in any business enterprise. As a result, it was impossible for trade to make any progress. Countries to the west of Germany and Austria had broken, I'm talking about now Holland, right, in England, all right? Well, France, I guess, somewhat, all right? The West, right, had broken with these old-fashioned methods and were rising rapidly in wealth and power. The rest of Europe was standing still. Frederick William, he's the first, there are a few people with that name, all right, Frederick William the first, Elector of Prussia, 1640 to 1688, saw the need for reforming the economic conditions of his country by breaking the stranglehold of the guilds. You see how Prussia is going to rise in power and in strength, and ultimately that's why, when the country will be reunited, it's coming from Prussia. Okay. Strong and capable, cunning and ruthless, he gained for himself the title of the Great Elector because he started Prussia on the road to military and political power. This power derived from the changes he forced in the economic order of his lands. It's very interesting. I mean, Germany, I think, is very unique in this. Historically, it's a very authoritarian country. I think that's in part why Hitler was able to rise to power. That's why Russia, even the dissolution of the Soviet Union, they just seem to always want a very strong head, of their government. So Germany really broke that mold, to tell you the truth. In the 50s, 60s, up until this day. I mean, it is a democratic country. It might have numerous other problems, but it is a democratic country. But you see, Russia can't seem to break out of that. Okay, yeah. As one of the means, I just think it was Putin. He's like a crazy man. So why doesn't somebody go in there and I don't know, get rid of him? I mean, why do people keep on? Why have they voted in their fake elections? Supposedly for him. I don't know. As one of the means to achieve his ends, the great elector made use of the Jews in his midst. All right. He sees they're very canny, they have good business sense, and he's going to make use of them because he wants to make his principality, Prussia, to become a mightier and a stronger, more dominant force in Germany. Okay. Okay, he now began to play a shrewd game. He granted the Jews certain trading privileges, now in one locality, now in another. So he doesn't want to offend, the burghers, right? But this this Christian middle class. So, he'll let the Jews, I don't know, let's say have some sort of influence in one particular area, but only in one region. Okay. And then he'll do it in another region. So, so it won't be too obvious, won't awaken too much animosity in the middle class. The guilds on behalf of the burghers reacted by making vigorous protests. Naturally, they don't want to see the Jews, retain any economic right. They want to be in control, make all those decisions. Then the elector would use the privileges of the Jews to bargain with the burghers, either to gain greater authority for himself, naturally, right? Or to gain some change in the general economic condition. So because it's a very early beginning of building up the power and might of Germany. But again, it's just happening in Prussia. All right. This effort to strengthen the economic position of the state did have a beneficial effect on the Jews. They became increasingly interested in international commerce. Right? And again, because of, right, don't you, if you meet a fellow Jew, you go any place in the world, but you meet a fellow Jew, you have this great affinity, for that person. And certainly it's coming to business things, wouldn't you rather, engage, with trade or commerce or with a Jew who you trust? You're not going to trust that general Christian population. They only want to take advantage of you, but your fellow Jew you would. And by the way, if they would communicate with one another, it would often be via Hebrew, right? Because nobody else could read it, well, except certain Christian scholars. but with your fellow Jew, again, eventually, I'm sure it was in Yiddish also. Okay, but Yiddish is now going to become the language, right, of Central Europe and then eventually Eastern Europe. Okay. Okay, all right, towards the bottom. They became increasingly international commerce and the trade among the various small German states in the many opportunities for wholesale trading. Thought that was interesting, because the Jews, right, we were up until here in America, right, we were in the wholesale trade, and in the manufacturing of new articles, which the guilds had been neglecting. In other words, like the guilds were just being very traditional. Whatever they had done, like 300 years past, they're still continuing to do this. But again, the elector wants to modernize the country, make it a more powerful country, both economically, remember, we learned also militarily. So he's going to be relying on the Jews because the Jews are always looking for opportunities. The Jews of the late, right on page 5, the Jews of the, we'll be doing time-wise, all right? Yeah, I'm fine. The Jews of the late 17th century did for the economic welfare of the Germany of their day what their ancestors had done for the same part of the world over 1,000 years before. And so just think back, I don't know, 1,000 years, maybe 700 years, prior, when the Jews were also very much involved in trade, right? Not just Germany, remember Italy, that whole Mediterranean basin, they played an extremely important role there until the Christians of Venice took over, a good part of that trade. Their commerce and industry made life easier for the masses of the population, and because it was bringing in money to the country, and helped Germany recover from the destructive effects of the 30 Years' War. Okay. The people, however, refused to see any connection between their improved situation and the economic activity of the Jews. Like, God forbid they should thank the Jews, right, for improving, their lot in life. They preferred to listen to the complaints of the burghers that the Jews were taking away profits that otherwise should have gone into the pockets of the Christians. Well, if you were smart enough and you could figure out how to do the same thing, you could have, you also would probably do well. But the Jews, again, because of our very unique position, we really, we weren't beholden necessarily to any, we had to the emperor, we have a show of obeisance because, he was in charge of his Jews, but, we were very independent, a very small little population within the country, so we could maneuver better. Okay, all right. Thus, no improvement was made in the conditions under which the Jews lived. The ghetto regulations continued in force. And I told you, the terrible, the poverty that was in the ghetto, the crowded conditions, obviously disease is going to spread, when you're living on top of one another. And many localities excluded Jews altogether, right? They couldn't live, or they'd be expelled and then they'd come back. The right of residence was restricted in many towns to this is interesting, to the oldest child, while the remaining children had to seek homes elsewhere as they came of age. So let's say you had 5, 6 children. When that oldest child, the firstborn, came of age, so he could remain living there. But as the other children all got, let's say, the age of 18, I don't know what they consider, they had to leave. They could not stay. So they're keeping down the Jewish population somewhere. But wherever they could, But we have connections with Jews in other areas. So, could you take Shlomi? Could in Bavaria, could you find a place for him to live and help him find a business? No, because they're not orphans. It's when they became of age, they had to leave that town. Only the firstborn child could stay. Okay. Jews could not cross any of the numerous boundaries that existed all over Germany without paying a degrading tax. In other words, so if you wanted to go from Bavaria right to Saxony, we just talked about, you would have to pay a tax to get into that area. Taxes continued to be as onerous as before. Some slight opportunity was given to Jews to participate in the cultural advances being made at that time. Just a really minute amount. And a small number were granted the privilege of attending the University of Frankfurt on the Oder. These are all rivers, Main, Oder, right? But they're two Frankfurts. Okay. I remember learning also. I couldn't find any of my sources now, but I do remember learning this. So I don't know if this was in high school or college when I studied Jewish history, that you even had to get permission to get married, right? So let's say if you wanted to move to another town, I mean, you would have to, again, the authorities would have to permit you to do so. So they were living very constrained lives, or they would make you wait a number of years, until they would allow you to get married. I mean, when you want to leave, you can understand why Jews, the population in Germany, Jewish population, is going to go down during this time period. And I will later, when I discuss the early Achronim, there definitely are some still from Germany, but it wasn't like in its heyday, the time period of the Tosfos, where we had many, many great scholars. Look at the Rush. He leaves Germany, he goes to Spain, actually. So it's not as much of a flowering of Jewish learning, again, because of these very difficult circumstances the Jews are finding themselves in. Okay, let's go on. So we'll talk a little bit about this. In earlier centuries, the German rabbinate stood at the forefront of Jewish intellectual life. The ghetto imprisonment, the extreme poverty, and the terrors of war had not only destroyed the schools of learning, the yeshivas, but also crushed the independence of spirit necessary for cultural progress. When your life is in constant upheaval, how can you grow in your Torah learning? I mean, you have to take care of your daily needs, the safety of your family, and your energies, are focused on that. Not to say they continue to learn to the best of their ability, but to rise to great heights, in scholarship, that became increasingly difficult. In Germany, the Jews were so small a minority as to have neither incentive nor opportunity for scholastic achievement. Most of the rabbis of the German Jewish communities were men who had gained knowledge and reputation in Polish academy. So isn't this interesting? So the Jews, over these 200 years, they're going to be gradually leaving Germany, most of them going to Poland, where then when they needed leaders of their various communities that did still exist, the Rabbanim came from Poland and served in that role.
By the way, today in Germany, they are going and they need a rab for the interpretation of Shema Yom Kippur.
Well, they take them from Israel.
They have to do research because there's nothing in Germany available. So they bring them out.
Right. Some American Rabbanim, have gone there also to serve in that role. But it's interesting, that it's now a slight shift westward, right? Because, these communities, there are still Jews in these various towns, and they want a Rav to head their kahila, but they don't have anybody locally who's knowledgeable enough in halacha. So they have to actually hire, right? I love this. Do you ever that movie, Frisco Kid?
Yeah.
Right? How they hired this rabbi, right, to go out. We doesn't even know where was he going, to San Francisco? Right. Okay. Up to okay, most of the rabbis, right? Some of these rabbonim. So why are these rabbis themselves willing to leave Poland? Right? It seems like a good place to settle. Because is it ever peaceful for us wherever we live? They were men who had fled from Poland during the Khmelnytsky uprising, and it's resulting from 1648, 1649. It's the same time period. So, it's terrible, right? Just came out of those 30 years war, terrible poverty and dislocation. And then what is it so great in the Ukraine? This is the Ukraine when we're talking about these Khmelnytsky, and they still honor him to this day, right? The Ukrainians, Christian Ukrainians.
Poland is Ukraine?
No,
And at that point, it's actually part of Russia. It was a very large conglomeration. There was Poland, Lithuania was one kingdom, and then there's Tsarist Russia. And the Ukraine, it's sort of in the middle. right? That's why a lot of Ukrainian people are now fleeing to Poland. That's on their border. You look at the map, you'll see, and Russia is to their east. Now, they also touch a few other countries. Talk about Ukraine. It was these wars that helped to spread the intense Talmudic study so characteristic of Polish Jewry and bring it to Germany. So that same method of analyzing Gemara, right, the Talmud, it's that whole concept, right, of Torah learning. It's going to be brought now from Poland back to Germany. Although remember, those some very great Rishonim were originally German Jews, right? Okay, so now should I start with the next thing, or we're getting closer to the end? I'll just start a little bit about Austria. So again, you'll see the close connection, and I can finish this at another time. Okay, the Jews of Austria had suffered the same thing like Germany we're talking about, had suffered greatly during the period of unrest and persecution, again, following the Black Plague. I mean, it was terrible. I think I read at least a third of Europe's population died in the Black Plague, right? Could have been even more, but at least a third. Many Jews were burnt at the stake. Again, I did not understand, how this plague was spreading. It was very deadly. You die very quickly, from it. So now, in their fear, right, they're very also superstitious. They attacked the Jews who, for centuries now, the church has been, blaspheming them, and we're the people of the devil, etc. So we were an easy target. Many Jews were burnt at the stake in the environs of Vienna. So it's not just the Spanish, right, who did this to us at the Auto da Fe, obviously other places too. And the rest were expelled from the city. That's always a good thing. We don't exactly, let's just get rid of them. Their property confiscated. Hey, you can't take your goods with you. Look about those Spanish Jews when they left in 1492. They could take very, very little with them. Yeah. Later in the 15th century, now 1400s, the Viennese Jews were again expelled in 1421. However, the Dukes of Austria, who were frequently also emperors of Germany, right? I remember I had mentioned earlier, Holy Roman Emperor often was an Austrian, showed eagerness to have the Jews return. They were a great source of money, income for him. No one really believed the charge of host desecration, which had caused their expulsion to begin with. So here they're not accusing them of necessarily poisoning, but it's host desecration. Host desecration, I had explained to you when we did medieval time period, those little wafers that they give you at a communion. So that they literally believe that the Jews, so it's supposed to be the body, right, of Christ, that the Jews came with like little daggers, as if we are again torturing Jesus. So when I first learned about it, I was like, what? How could people believe such as if that's all we have to do with our time is get these little wafers and stab it, but this was a belief that people had, and look, we're out of medieval times, right? Or we're coming to the end. Don't forget, this is still the 1400s. So, it's, I guess you would say medieval period goes up to the year 1500. So those old beliefs are still hanging around.
Those wafers were actually little matzahs.
Yeah.
And there were witnesses that claimed they saw blood coming out of those wafers.
Right. It was a
Very
terrible
believe
thing.
anything.
Yeah. In addition, there's so many other actions. The blood libel, I mean, that goes on for up into modern times. So I'll just read one more and a paragraph, and I think then we'll stop. Okay. The best the rulers of Austria could do against the stubborn resistance of the townsmen was to grant one or more Jews the right to stay in Vienna for a specified period to transact business for the imperial court. So he still wanted those Jews around, but only certain ones. The one, obviously, those of us who were in the lower class, well, we don't need you. You're not bringing us any income. But those few wealthy individuals, we'll allow them to stay. Consequently, though there were Jews in Vienna almost at all times, it was only in 1582 that an organized community of some 30 families, it's all 30 families that constituted the Jewish population of Vienna, right, could be found in the city. Since they were a source of enormous profit to the imperial treasury, repeated objections by the Viennese townsmen could not dislodge them because the emperor was more than happy to have these wealthy Jews stay there, bring more income in, he could continue taxing them as much as he wanted. And obviously they stayed, again, they were making money somehow, no matter what, even with the heavy taxation, so they stayed on. On 2 points, however, the emperor had a yield. 1625, the Jews were forced to move into the district called Leopoldstadt. And even I remember reading stories of Jews, in World War II, in the early part, before they also, were sent away to the gas chambers, that they lived, right? They still lived. This was a Jewish neighborhood. I mean, wealthier Jews would not have lived there anymore, but so Jews living again, it's sort of more like an enclosed area, sort of like a ghetto area. It's called Leopoldstadt. All right, as I said, it was made into a ghetto. And remember, we were talking about 30 families. I mean, it wasn't a very large population. And after 1630, they were forced to listen to Christian sermons in their synagogues. And we learned about this. It started in Italy. The church, Catholic Church thought this was a wonderful idea. I mean, it starts even in Spain. It's whatever. Okay, so I think we will pause here. Okay, and so hopefully I'm going to be in touch with my son Shalom. So next week, you will have a nice treat. Hopefully you'll be able to make it, and you can hear Shalom talk about what he called they're mostly Portuguese Jews, although they're known as Spanish Portuguese Jews, who will gradually get out of Portugal. Remember, they had been forcibly converted, and then the Inquisition came in the 1500s to Portugal, but eventually they're going to find a way out. So we know that some, remember, went eastward all the way to Constantinople, but a larger majority, obviously it's very much closer physically, will go up eventually to Holland, but only when Holland stops being Catholic, when it becomes a Protestant country. And then eventually, we will find them in London, right? And then they come to the Americas. All right. So be well, everybody. And Mir Hashem, I will see you next week. And only good. Okay.
Thank you, Malka.
My pleasure. Always nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Hopefully soon in person.
Yeah, of course. One of these days.
One of these days. All right. Take care.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Wait. I'm trying to figure how to